Very good evening. The Taliban are rapidly advancing towards the Afghan capital, Kabul.
On August the 12th, while I presented Sky News Tonight in the comfort of a secure television studio, one of our news teams had arrived on the ground in Afghanistan, faced with a very different environment.
There's fierce fighting in the country's second city of Kandahar. Thousands of people have fled the fighting and sought sanctuary in the capital. More than 12,000 displaced people.
Where they can find a space, they huddle in family groups. Every day, more and more people...
Sky's Chief Correspondent Stuart Ramsay, along with his producer and camera operator, began reporting on the developing situation.
This is fast turning into a major humanitarian crisis. The numbers of displaced people grow by the day, even the hour.
In the days that followed, they captured the harrowing images many of us have seen on our screens and recorded the desperate stories of those trying to flee as the Taliban took control. But they couldn't show us everything. On a special edition of the Sky News Daily podcast with me, Dermot Murnaghan, Stuart and his team take us behind the camera to reflect on a week in Kabul.
Right, do a clap and then we can start. Ready?
I'm Stuart Ramsay. I'm the reporter. We're outside in the compound where the British relief effort is underway. It's quite noisy. There's always generators. There's always planes taking off. Occasionally you'll hear shooting. That's people trying to control crowds.
I'm Dominique van Heerden. I'm Stuart's producer. And
I make the coffee.
and I do more than make coffee.
Dominique makes sure we don't get ourselves into trouble and basically does all the hard stuff. And I'm Toby Nash. I shoot, edit and misplace things for Sky News.
We're all here in Kabul. We've been here now for how long?
Feels like months. We started before the Taliban took the city. And we arrived and I think we did immediately came off the plane and did a camp for internally displaced people.
That seems like such a long time. I don't know, actually. That feels like a different time.
We came into Kabul and we had heard about hundreds, maybe thousands of refugees in the camp.
Muhajidin Ukunzada arrived from Mazar-e-Sharif a day ago, joining 1,800 families in this park.
We went and filmed that. That was one of the first things we filmed.
And it was a park, Toby, no?
It was in a park, yeah.
It was quite tense, I think, because there was still fear that there were armed groups that maybe within these refugee groups and everything. We were definitely very sort of on edge when we went in, weren't we? And a lot of people, there were some people there very definitely not pleased to see us. I seem to remember it was over quite quickly and we had to leave in something of a hurry.
It's sort of one of those ones where it was like the local population was sort of beginning to move towards all the trouble being caused by outsiders. And that we were sort of the outsider.
That's right. And even before the Taliban came to Kabul, the streets were tense. You know, we had to be very mindful about how we were filming.
Farida Khurasani's husband and brother, both police officers, were killed by the Taliban in Kunduz. They were attacked in their police station. She escaped to Kabul with her 2 children. She has nothing now. She feels failed by everyone.
Very, very short amounts of times outside the vehicles, just sort of in and out.
And the military and the police were incredibly on edge.
Yeah, everyone was jumping because the Taliban were getting nearer and nearer by the minute, weren't they?
Literally.
Yeah, it turns out they may have already been here.
The real impression you get here is that people feel that Kabul is being surrounded, or it's certainly going to be in the coming weeks.
So we spent a few days filming around Kabul, and I don't think any of us expected it to fall on the Sunday. That took us by surprise. We'd heard the previous night they were around 7 miles from Kabul.
And there was the breakout from the prison on the edge of town.
That's right.
Yeah.
But given it's such a big city, and Kandahar took a while to fall, and it's the second largest city. And we thought even if they were at the so-called gates of Kabul, that it would take a good few days. And I think we all went to bed thinking that. We didn't go to bed thinking the next day it would fall.
I think we were quite tense that night. I remember thinking they are only 7 to 10 miles away or whatever.
I didn't sleep well.
Well, we all got calls.
Oh, the Foreign Office phoned us in the middle of the night, yeah.
Saying, where are you? And we need to put your names down and we need to identify where you are and eventually we'll have to call you to go.
I was told I was offered a flight that afternoon. So they called me at 3 a.m. on the Sunday and said there's a flight at 4. No, much quicker.
So so we get to Sunday.
Yeah, so Sunday but it started off very normally, right? We had your live to do that morning, and Toby and I went up to the roof to... Well, first of all, we'd had a few false alarms on sort of should we move from our hotel or not that morning, because the Taliban were apparently about 2.5 miles by morning. So it was kind of a mad rush of do we pack, do we go, do we stay, do we go?
Incredibly, within all of this, we are able to actually get a coffee.
You'd done a call into Sky just to say, the new info coming in, and Toby and I ran up to the roof. We had a position at the hotel we were staying at that it's a very high position. It's at least 4 stories up and it overlooks the street. It's near the presidential palace where we set up to do a live. But when Toby and I got on the roof, it was just sort of, there were gunshots and people running, and we weren't really sure what was happening.
Police were on the move at speed. I still don't think we ever really figured out what was going on there, did we?
We think actually it was, well, we don't know if the Taliban had already God knows. It might have just been a diversion. It might have been the president leaving.
Spooked cops, could have been
we
anything.
don't know, but it spooked everybody, and people were running about, and so I called Stuart. I said, you better get up to the roof, and he came running up, and we went live.
A lot of shouting coming down the road behind me. In fact, it is I think it's a procession of the Taliban. Yes, it is. There's the white flag.
And at that point, when we were live, all the choppers were, flying overhead, and it suddenly went from feeling like quite a tense city to a city, I don't want to say under attack, it makes it sound a bit extreme, because it wasn't actually but it made it seem like the helicopters hovering around the city. We saw more air than we'd seen in the days before.
The Americans started evacuating the embassy. That's what prompted the panic, because you had seemingly every chopper they had in country just ferrying people from the grounds of the embassy all day.
The Saigon moment that Joe Biden said he didn't want.
Yeah, and that photo now exists, and that, I think, was what prompted the panic. The Taliban hadn't, I don't think, entered, certainly not the centre of town at that point, but they might as well have done.
I think the programme quickly morphed into not a story about Afghanistan, but open-ended. And so that means we're pretty much going to be live, apart from the odd break, the whole time.
So we were live, and then, I was kind of standing to the side listening to Stuart live, and
there they are, right here.
Sort of heard him say, wait, hang on,
they keep going past this hotel.
I was as confused as the viewer, trust me.
That's right, I was on a box, which is in the sort of centre of the roof, a variety of reasons, but it's the shot. But I could see down into the street, but nobody could see anything except me. But I heard this chanting, and I remember turning round, and there it was, the white flag and a load of Talibs.
And you couldn't capture it because of the way the camera was
10 metres back using a special lens, which means that even if I could have picked the camera up and run to the edge, I wouldn't have been able to film them. Or if I would have filmed a very, very close shot of like half of one of their bodies.
Yeah, so I ran over, but I think I got the tail end on an iPhone shot. But I think that moment anyway, the way you described it, Stuart, the way you described it to the viewer, and the way you described what you were seeing, it was as good as seeing it.
Yeah, well, don't know about that. But that was like, oh right, okay, well we know they're here. Are they going to come in and storm the place?
As it turns out, they didn't though. But we made the decision to move anyway.
Yeah, there's a variety of security issues, one of the worst security issue being caused by the head of security at the hotel. But he decided to leg it, and it made sense to come to a new location, which is actually a functioning hotel, and our view was that we would get here and move in and out.
This place being closer to the airport, which was our thinking, which was not being blocked between where we were and the airport.
Yeah, I'd rather have the Taliban between me and my story than me and my route out in a situation like this, was my position on it. So.
Yeah, exactly. So we moved here, and then it sort of in the following days kind of became something of an accidental embed, because the British military moved in as well.
Well, I remember in the morning, I saw you in the morning and you were furious. Furious. Stuart, we made the wrong decision. I always said it from the beginning. We shouldn't be here. We're locked in. The story's outside.
You do that. You definitely did that.
No, I did, but that was with good reason. It's because the military would not open the gates for us. We weren't allowed to go outside to film anything. We were stuck inside here, and we had no control over our movements.
I remember talking to some of the other journalists who'd come as well, and basically saying, this is rubbish. but we are actually where the story is, because it is all about the airport, because the takeover had been so quick and seamlessly useful.
That's true, but the story wasn't here yet. The story was about the Taliban being in town at that point. And we were frustrated that we couldn't, and our colleagues were out there, and we were frustrated that we couldn't be there.
I'm sure they were all really chuffed.
Yes, I'm sure they were. But then I think I woke up on the Wednesday morning and I was just wide awake, and I thought to myself, wow, we're actually being completely ridiculous. The story is literally at our front gate. Why are we trying to get out of here? So in the day we wandered over to the soldiers, and we didn't ask them if we can go out and film. We just said, we're going out to film. And they sort of just let us out. And there began a remarkable few days of coverage of what was going on just outside the airport.
The streets are really empty. I mean, we were here only a day or so ago, and in the hours from this morning we could see it was absolutely chock-a-block with people. Now it's pretty quiet, pretty empty.
It kept changing, Toby, right?
Every day. Because in reality we've only moved a few hundred metres for the last week now. If I'm trying to film stuff, you always want to make sure that it looks new and interesting for the viewer, and every day I step out that gate and the scene has changed completely. It's like a new film set's been built.
Wahid was a British Army translator in Helmand. Now he and his family are going to the UK. It's been agreed.
This is a very happy day in my life.
And you captured some pretty remarkable moments, Toby, many of which ended up on the front pages of national newspapers.
Well, yeah, that's a weird feeling, actually. That's never happened before.
Particularly the soldiers carrying babies. And
That when you think about it, it's newspaper material, isn't it? In fact, it's probably better as a photo than it was as the video. It was good as video, but the single image that went over all the papers.
And this is a soldier carrying a baby
that's been pushed through the fence with her mother. This wasn't the day that went completely crazy, was it? It was the day before, I think. This is all relative. It's crazy every day.
Thousands of Afghans who are coming, who have no right to come here, but they're coming anyway, and they can't just leave them to get crushed in, and the heat is terrible, and there's lots of children. So the first day we arrived, right, we went out and there was soldiers and people right in their faces.
Yeah.
Next day there was barbed wire and even more people in their faces.
Yeah.
Next day there were two broken down cars that had been stuck in the middle of the road with
covered in barbed wire. Yeah.
The next day the
Taliban.
with the Taliban were now sitting in the car.
If you remember the day after the cars with the barbed wire, the next day we went out and that entire barricade had been destroyed in the night. The cars had been pushed to one side and the soldiers were holding the line. And the day after that, overnight they put the shipping containers in, which is the thing that held.
we got quite comfortable though in our position with the soldiers outside, and until the day we stepped out and there weren't any soldiers outside.
And they weren't there.
That was a moment.
Yeah. Literally walk up and they, can you go out? And they just said,
You want to go out?
No, I think he said don't go too far. At no point did he say there are no soldiers out there. Immediately outside this gate is the Taliban. So when the gate opens and they're there, none of us are ready for it.
The first person we see has got a beard and a machine gun.
Yeah.
So what's incredible, just one step away, there's a Taliban right next to the British forces who are trying to...
Well, you said, I didn't expect this. Now everyone waved.
Gave them a wave and they sort of gave a nod and we filmed. But it's been a remarkable few days filming, and I think, Stuart, you didn't expect the stories to be go so big, I guess.
It's just horrendous. Taliban hitting people.
The Saturday was one of the worst things I've ever seen, ever, anywhere. I've done loads of awful things, wars, disasters, refugee crises, but I've never seen anything like this.
No.
10,000 people trying to get through a gap, and people died as a result. And there was nothing anyone can do, and that's when it stopped being a system by which they're trying to work out who can or can't come to a processing system for who can or can't come through. But soldiers were actually saving lives, and literally it was a rescue operation. It had nothing to do with anything anymore.
No. They weren't processing anyone that day. They just had to hold the line and stop people dying.
Sometimes we can manage to calm the crowd down.
The soldiers out here have been, I have to say, amazing. These are paras, shock troops, really hard, and the compassion and sort of care they've shown to the Afghans has been incredible. And they've been incredibly polite and helpful with us as well. That day was very different, and I wouldn't hold it against them for a second, but they were operating to the limits of their capacity just to keep a lid on that situation and save as many lives as possible. And I got shouted at and told in no uncertain terms to get out of the way, and I hold no grudges with that at all, because they were doing an incredible job.
And the medics were just literally jumping from one casualty to another casualty to another casualty. It never stopped.
No.
And boiling hot.
Yeah, and I think, I think the one thing to remember is that a lot of that we couldn't even show on TV.
Fatima is terrified. Her husband joined the Taliban and took to beating her. She and her 4-year-old daughter have nothing but a UN letter identifying them as victims.
Afghanistan is Taliban. Taliban is terrorists. My husband is a terrorist Talib. America, Canada.
This doctor from Herat, who is with her sister and her mother, have absolutely no rights to get through the gates. They fled the Taliban and are now stuck. They have hope, but it seems hopeless.
We don't have any brother, we don't have father. You know that living in here is very difficult for us. We were living in Herat and we escaped from Herat and came to Kabul city to save our life.
I've filmed things that will never ever be seen by anyone. We're making a documentary out of this, and I transferred all the rushes back to the UK. And I had to warn the editor. I said, on that day, viewer advisory, you need to be very careful. No one should be watching that who doesn't have to, because there's stuff on there that is absolutely horrific.
Yeah, traumatic.
I had to shoot it. I'm not being gruesome, but if you're shooting a body, you have to. I'm waiting for them to cover the body so we have an image that we can show that can convey to people that people are dying. But they haven't covered the bodies, and they're carrying the bodies, and it's. These are young women. I mean,
well, you shot the picture you can't show, but you shot the picture you can't show. So how that affects you?
It's weird. When you're actually working and you're shooting, your mind is full of a lot of technical things that you have to consider: the composition, the exposure, all these things. Focus. So actually, it always acts as a kind of distraction, and in a way, it's harder when you're looking back at it and you're editing with it, because then you're just watching it. Years ago, during the Yazidi crisis, the Sinjar Mountain, when ISIS took northern Iraq, I flew onto Sinjar Mountain in a helicopter, and we picked a load of people up, and we came back, and then the next day we went back to that airbase to film, and the same helicopter took off to pick people up, and it crashed, taking off the mountain. It killed both the pilots, lots of people on the helicopter, and the Iraqi guys said to me, when they sent their only other serviceable helicopter to pick up the casualties, "Can you not film this out of respect?" And I said, "Fine." And that was the first time I've ever actually just watched a horrible thing happen. I'm always behind a bank of technical questions, which is a defense from this stuff. And when you guys are just watching things without any filter, I think it's probably much harder for you. The camera is a sort of barrier.
I think what I found most overwhelming is just the volume of people who want help, who write to you and call and say, please help me, please help my family, please help me get through the barrier, please help my case.
And you've done loads of it.
We tried as a team, we've tried to help as many people as we can, especially people whose documentation is absolutely spot on, British citizens, etc. We've done our best to help, but you can never do enough.
And 90% of the people who write to you, because you've had these discussions with the Foreign Office people here, and they send you all their documents, and you look at them and you know they've got no chance, and now you're the person who has to tell them no. It's heartbreaking. I've never had this before. That's probably, I've found that the hardest thing is not being able to help.
But you do help.
No, but you can't help everyone.
No, you can't help everybody.
At the point when you know what you're leaving someone to, and there's nothing you can do to help them, and you're communicating with them, it's...
Well, and the other worst bit is the volume of children.
I tell you what was amazing, actually, was one of the stories of the military telling me is that they would... and we saw it, of course, but they called it simmering.
It doesn't matter where you look, it's the same desperation. American soldiers pulling children, whole families from the pens they're being kept behind for processing.
They would see these kids, little between 5 and 10 years old, who have just sort of wandered through the crowd and somehow got themselves on the wrong side of the barricade, split from their parents. Soldiers would pick them up and simmer them up in the air and hold them up. And,
is that what they call it? I didn't know
they
that.
called it simmering, yeah. And they said they hold him up, and then in the crowd, they'd see a wave of someone, and it's like the family of mum and dad, and then they would lower the kids down, and they'd be passed over their heads.
That's how they're doing it. I wonder, because you see kids separated everywhere.
Yeah. Posters of missing children. I mean, because families are split all the time.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who don't know. They don't know. They don't have any idea who these kids are attached to, and I don't know how they're going to do it. Okay, you're going to go grab them? Okay, okay. So are you told him to go all the way around to the next one? Okay, fine. He'll get here in the end. So interestingly, this is us literally helping someone get in at the moment. Do we need to pause?
If you take it just from the soldiers themselves, they've never seen anything like it, never been involved in anything like it, multiple tour, dyed in the wool paratroopers who say that they're in tears, their men are in tears, they're exhausted. But I've never been involved in a story like this, because
I mean, I've cried.
It is a relief operation, a humanitarian relief operation in a war zone with politicians thousands of miles away saying things are all going jolly well when actually they're going really jolly badly.
I struggle to contain my anger about that. You may have noticed.
No, but that is why eyewitness journalism is so important, and being here is so important. And even though it's an extremely challenging assignment, and when it's all said and done, I'm sure we'll all talk about it and we'll kind of reflect on it. But for now, it's just getting the story out so that the reality of it is not sort of hidden.
Well, I mean, it was a funny thing. We called it the accidental embed.
Yeah.
We were in a hotel and it became a military base overnight. And basically, with the volume of people outside and the Taliban everywhere, getting here became almost impossible. So we were in and could see what was going on, and everyone on the outside couldn't get in, but they could see what we were filing. It was a sort of an amazing story to be in, but both fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. And none of it. Did we know exactly how it was going to go? No, we knew the airport was the right story to do, but our location was thrust upon us as opposed to thought out in a strategic way.
Yeah, Dominique's right. There was a moment when all our colleagues are running around downtown Kabul on the first day we got here, and we were stuck inside here, that we maybe all wondered if we'd done the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's always guesswork on stories. You never really know how it's going to go. But this one clearly is going down in history. The fall of Kabul and what happened and the withdrawal of all the forces. I mean, it's a huge moment in history.
I started coming here in 2001, and here we are 20 years later, and most of my adult life, the best part of my adult life has been covering Afghanistan in one form or another. And it started with a huge explosion, a terror attack, and here it is, ends with a superpower and its supporting armies leaving. With the Taliban back in charge, it's completely bizarre.
You know this, you've both been here, but if you spend time here during the war, being face to face, like less than a metre away from the Taliban, is mind-bending, because you often wouldn't even really see them if you're in somewhere like Helmand. You'd hear them, you'd see the effects of them, but they're in a concealed position, firing. They learn very quickly not to show themselves in Helmand because there were Apaches and things that would take them out, and they're right in front of you. Oh, I've never been that close to them. It's absolutely astounding. The reality of the situation is the military had to cooperate with them. Otherwise, there would be no evacuation. And I think for the guys in the Paras, all the soldiers here, that's just the strangest thing. But
I think it's the strangest thing for all of us. What a tragic story.
That's going to take some thinking.
My thanks to Stuart, Dominique and Toby there, reflecting on their deployment to Kabul for this special edition of the Sky News Daily podcast. You can keep across what's happening in Afghanistan and all the political fallout on Sky News and across our digital channels as well. This episode was produced by Annie Joyce along with Rob Fellows and Simon Windsor.